Let's pick up here with the second normal form. Again, this is the Coulson tutorial on normalization. The second normal form here says no partial dependencies on a concatenated key. Well, what does that mean? Concatenated key, we know, is a table or an entity that has two fields put together to make up the primary key. And where we left off, you can see this orders table here does have a concatenated primary key. Order ID and ID, item ID. Now, not all tables or entities when you're designing will have this situation where it has a concatenated key. If an entity that you're designing doesn't have a concatenated key, then you can skip the second normal form, because there would be no way for a field to have a partial dependency on a concatenated key. Okay, but this one does, so what do we do here? We have to test each field in here to see if they're only partially dependent on one, or a part of the primary key. So let's do this in the example. Okay, so we got two fields that are the primary key, order ID and item ID. We had to do that to make each record unique up in the first normal form that we talked about in the last video. We go through each of these fields and determine if they're only dependent upon part of the primary key. And let's start with the order date. Is that dependent on just the order ID or just the item ID, or does it need both? Well, in this case, this first field we're looking at, order date, is dependent on only the order ID, meaning if you're given an order ID number, you can determine a single value for order date. So therefore, this first field already breaks the second normal form. Alright. And that's what they're talking about. You should read through this. And therefore, we're going to put a big red X next to it. So it says our table has already failed the second normal form. But let's continue testing the other columns. We're going to find all the fields that failed this test. These customer fields, does it rely on order ID? So it talks about that. We don't really need to worry about the customer information. It says we're just going to put a question mark by those fields now, because we're going to take care of that situation with the third normal form. So moving on, item description is really just dependent upon item ID, so that would get a red X because it's only dependent on part of the primary key. Item quantity now, that's an interesting field. Item quantity refers to the number of items purchased on a particular invoice. So this field really is dependent on both parts of the primary key. It's dependent on both the order number and the item number. So that one gets a green check mark. Item description is really just dependent on item ID. That gets an X. And those other fields, the total price and those subtotal fields, we really don't even need to save those fields, because we can it says we can reconstruct that. We can calculate that value from other other fields in the table. So we're going to discard it, like it says here. So here's what this looks like now. We have three fields here that break the second normal form. We got one field that's dependent on both parts of the primary key, and these other three that we just got a question mark. Actually 5 right here. These are customer information fields, which we're going to take care of in the third normal form, but for now we're going to leave them here. So how do we solve this problem? Here's what we're going to do. We break out the fields that are dependent on just part of the primary key. In this case, we're breaking out the ones that are dependent on the order ID, and we're going to call it order items. We still keep, actually we're breaking them out this way, sorry. Here's our original We got order ID and item ID is a concatenated key here with these fields, item description, quantity, and we left the other fields over here. This is a one-to-many relationship. Each order can have many items on it. But now this table has a concatenated primary key, so we have to apply this rule again. You know, are any of these fields dependent on just a part of this primary key? And we already know that because we did it before. Description is only dependent on order ID. Or excuse me, item description is only dependent on item ID. Quantity is dependent on both because this is the quantity of this item on a particular order. And the item price is really just dependent on the item ID. And that's what's shown here. We went through those rules again of the second normal form. Two fields failed it, so we again have to break this out into another table. There's the sample data. But here's now what our ERD is looking like. Now we broke it out, item ID, we got item description and price. Here's our kind of our original table with only one field left in it because this one field is dependent on both of those parts of the primary key. Then we got the data that we left in the original order table. Now we look at the second normal form. The only one of these tables we have to apply it to is this order items, and there is no field in here anymore that's only dependent on a part of the primary key. So in this case we passed the second normal form. Now this is a tough step. It's going to take a while to fully understand that, but I think this is a good example to start with. That takes us to the third normal form. I'll pick up with the next video there.